Welcome to the Bank of England Youth Forum podcast, where we're going to discuss digital currencies and how they affect the British youth. Today, we have some special guests with us, Louise, Guillermo, and Manisha.
Hello, I'm Louise Johnston, work at the Bank of England in the CBDC unit. I've been at the bank for about 11 years now, working in a variety of policy roles.
Hi there, I'm Manisha Patel. I work in the CBDC unit as well. I've been here for just over 4 years, and I've been working on the future of cash and digital currency since I joined. Thanks.
And I'm Guillermo Pons. I'm also working in the CBDC unit. Been at the bank just about 4 years now. Also, my previous role was different. I was doing bank resolution. Now I've been almost for a year in the CBDC team.
Awesome. Thank you guys very much for joining us today. So I guess we should just kick off with a standard question. What are CBDCs and how are they different from other forms of money and from other forms of cryptocurrency?
Yeah, so CBDC, first and foremost, stands for Central Bank Digital Currency. And the way we think about it is like something like an electronic version of cash, which would be issued by the Bank of England. So it'd be similar to the money that you have in your bank in that it would be digital and it would be able to be used almost everywhere. You could spend these, we're calling them digital pounds, in the shops and online using your phone or a physical card, as well as sending them to friends and family. The main difference to cash that we know today, the main difference to the money in your bank account, is that a digital pound would be issued by the Bank of England, just like banknotes. So we think a digital pound could offer a new way to pay that could be positive for consumers and for businesses and could help maintain trust in money. Important to note that if we were to have a digital pound in the UK, we're not looking to replace cash. It will be made available alongside cash because we know there's lots of people that still like to use banknotes, and we will keep providing it for the public for as long as there's demand for them. You mentioned how CBDC are different to other cryptocurrencies. So important to note, a digital pound wouldn't be a crypto asset. We call them crypto asset because we don't see them as a currency. So you may have heard of crypto assets such as Bitcoin or Ether, and they're issued by the private sector, whereas a digital pound would be issued by the Bank of England, and that means it'll be backed by the government. Also, the value of crypto is volatile, as I'm sure you've seen. So it can go up or down very quickly in a very short space of time. And that's not particularly useful when you want to make payments, like paying your bills or something. A digital pound, on the other hand, would retain its value over time. So £10 of digital pounds would always be worth the same as a £10 banknote. And then another key difference to crypto is that a digital pound would be designed to be highly efficient and not use the sort of energy intensive methods that you see with the likes of Bitcoin. It would support the bank's commitment to reduce our emissions and be in line with our own carbon target. So that's basically what CBDCs are in a nutshell and how they differ from crypto.
Awesome. Thank you very much for explaining to us what CBDCs are. Could you maybe explain to us a bit more in details why the Bank of England, but also other central banks, are exploring CBDCs?
Yeah, sure. As you noted there, it's not just us that's exploring this in the UK. A recent survey published by the Bank of International Settlements, which is an international organisation, showed that around 90% of central banks are actually exploring CBDC. Some of them have actually already launched one, so that's like Nigeria or the Bahamas. But although there's loads of countries looking at this, not all countries have the same motivations for introducing it. So the design and the use cases might be slightly different. So with that in mind, in the UK, we're exploring CBDC because we see that money and payments are changing. Fewer people are making payments in cash. And electronic payments such as credit card and debit card are increasing every year. So around 28% of payments were made using cash in 2018, and that's predicted to fall to just under 10% of payments by 2028. And looking at the electronic payments, so although electronic payments used to be provided exclusively by banks, now we've got a much more mixed payments landscape. So There's loads of fintech firms that are providing alternative payment services. And then there's even new types of payments themselves emerging that you may have heard of. So the main one that we focus on is stablecoins. So with those two things happening, it means it's the right time for us to be thinking about the future of money more generally. And that includes whether it's time that we consider the type of public that we provide, the type of money that we provide to the public.
We should note that, a lot of the youth these days are digital natives, and, this sounds like a very appealing thing for them. I guess a good question would be, what are some of the potential benefits, but also risks for the UK youth when it comes to CBDCs?
Great, thanks. So I guess in 2020, our discussion paper on CBDC kind of identified what we thought were a set of potential opportunities for central bank digital currencies. So for example, in the UK, having a new payment system could support a more resilient payments landscape, and a digital pound could be safer and more trustworthy than other private new forms of innovation such as crypto assets or stablecoins. And so it could also support households and businesses in making kind of fast, efficient and reliable payments as the payments landscape evolves and changes. So some of the benefits we identified could be more interesting for UK youth. So for example, a CBDC could help to meet future payment needs in the digital economy, given it might add new features to money, such as programmability, which could enable greater functionality and automation in payments. So for example, automated payments could be very useful for Internet of Things applications, or it could allow users to program payments from their wallets. So for example, when you get paid, you might be able to pay your rent straight away automatically. Now, implementing a digital pound also comes with risk. So we need to think about, how to manage those carefully. For example, if we introduced it, there could be some effects for the financial system. So if people exchange some of the money they have in their bank accounts for a digital pound, banks, rely on people's deposits to be able to provide credit to the economy. So I guess an overall reduction in bank deposits could have a downward effect on the amount of loans banks provide if it's not managed carefully. So there could be kind of less lending in the economy. But there are also other risks that might come with operating a large-scale payment system, which the Bank of England knows really well because we run the infrastructure that banks and other firms use to make payments. So it's really important that if a CBDC were to be issued, its system would need to be designed to be highly resilient to kind of cyber attacks to make sure it can operate at all times and users are safe.
Thank you. You mentioned risks, you mentioned the commercial deposits, you mentioned infrastructure. Are there any possible ways to manage the risks?
Sure. So, we have to look at the design really carefully, and there are ways to kind of tackle the risks that we're considering, and certainly need to consider them in great detail if we're going to introduce a CBDC or decide to do so. So, for example, when we think about the risks for disintermediation of commercial banks, we could think about how we apply limits to CBDC that could help control the outflow of money from bank accounts into CBDC. Now, this could be done with limits on how much money each person could have in a CBDC wallet at a given time, or a limit to the overall spends that could happen over a period of time. Another way that you could kind of manage the money that leaves the banking sector is, for example, using interest rates, or sometimes called remuneration bias. If CBDC offered a lower interest rate than your regular bank deposit, more people would prefer to kind of leave their money with a commercial bank rather than moving it into a CBDC wallet.
I know one of the things that really comes to mind when we think about CBDCs is privacy concerns, and I know that a lot of people would be thinking about that. And one thing I'd want to know is, what about those privacy concerns, and would the youth's privacy be respected?
Yeah, very good question. So, yeah, some people have concerns about privacy when it comes to CBDC. This is one of the questions that is often asked about. And this is mainly because CBDC would be run by the central bank, and some people believe the authorities would be monitoring users' spending. So with respect to privacy, it is very important to know that CBDC would comply with the applicable privacy protection rules, just like any other payment system has to. CBDC users would continue to be able to protect their privacy, to protect their personal data to today's legal standards, and also to any future data protection rights. So the bank would not have access to users' personal data. But it is important to note that there are other regulations that already apply to other types of electronic payments that would also apply to CBDC. So these regulations require the collection of certain amounts of personal data to fight, for example, financial crime. You may have heard of KYC, Know Your Customer, or AML, anti-money laundering regulations. The firms that facilitate your electronic payments today, like your bank or your debit card provider, they must apply these regulations. And as is the case today, private sector firms would provide the digital wallets in a eventual CBDC ecosystem. They would have to apply these regulations in the same way. So this means that they would need to have access to users' personal data to be able to comply with these regulations. But this also means that they would need to comply with data protection laws when handling this data.
And finally, now that we know much more about CBDCs, natural question on people's mind would be, what is the achieved work of the UK authorities on CBDCs, and what does it mean for the British youth?
So we're doing a lot of stuff on CBDC. There is a very long project. So one of the main things that we announced last year is we established a joint CBDC task force between us, the Bank of England and HM Treasury, to coordinate the exploration of a potential UK CBDC and discuss all these different policy issues that we've been talking about. So mainly the task force has been leading our work on CBDC, exploring the objectives and potential role of a UK CBDC, evaluating the different possible design features that a CBDC would need to display to achieve our policy goals, supporting an assessment of the overall case for UK CBDC, but also following international CBDC developments closely. CBDC would be a large undertaking, so we want to make sure that we are hearing from a wide range of stakeholders to get a good understanding of many of the important issues regarding CBDC. And for that, last year also we announced the creation of 2 new groups that have met over 2021 and 22 several times. These are the CBDC Engagement Forum and the CBDC Technology Forum. So the Engagement Forum is a very senior forum where we get input from industry, academia, civil society on practical challenges of designing and implementing and operating a CBDC. And the Technology Forum is a more technical forum, as the name says, where we get technical specialists to give us some very interesting input on the key functional design and technology issues related to CBDC. We publish minutes and materials of the forums in the bank's website, so we would definitely encourage anyone interested in this topic to check that out. Forum members have been really engaged on the topics that we've discussed, which included the likes of CBDC use cases, models of provision of CBDC, privacy, which we just covered. So yeah, those forums have been really useful for us. And it is important to note that we have made no decision on whether to introduce a CBDC yet, and we're still in the exploration phase. In view of making progress, we announced last year that we would launch a joint consultation process with HMT this year. So that's due to be published sometime later this year. And the aims of that consultation are to set out our assessment of the case of a UK CBDC. It will talk about the merits of further work to develop an operational and technology model. It will also evaluate the main issues, design features, benefits and implications for users and for businesses. And it will also inform a decision on whether the authorities are content to move into a multi-year development phase. So right now we are still in this research and exploration phase, which will probably continue for the next few years. And we hope that DCP will inform the decision whether to move to a development phase, which would then again span for several years. And it could involve in-depth testing of the optimal design of a potential UK CBDC. But that's some of the stuff that we have in the agenda for the next couple of years, potentially.
Thank you very much for your time today, guys. We really appreciate it. And we hope for the British youth out there listening that this has been a really informative session for you on CBDCs, maybe some of the advantages and disadvantages of them. Again, thank you once again for listening.